Hi, I'm Sharon Delarose, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the advanced technology of a race of Nordic extraterrestrials, Nordic aliens, just like the ones visiting today, that came down out of the sky into the British Isles in the Bronze Age, thousands of years ago. And we think of their technology as magic, but it was actually, we're catching up with them. A lot of what they had back then, we're catching up with it. One of my favorites is they had transcontinental, self-propelled, self-navigating, voice-activated ships that went across the ocean. And people think they went to two little islands off the coast of Ireland because that's where they usually left from. There were two islands. They weren't, they're on the old maps. One was called Demar and one was called High Brazil. And they were very, very close to the shore of Ireland. And that's where everybody assumes that they went. But when you dissect the itinerary that they gave us to some of their destinations, and when you analyze several of the legends of the different journeys that they took, you discover that they went thousands and thousands of miles in these ships. Now, here's the really interesting thing. These ships were self-propelled. They did not need sails. They did not need oars. They went on their own power with their own winds, was one of the ways they termed it. Another thing is they were self-navigating. You would tell one of these ships where to go. You would get in the ship, you would tell it where to go. And just like our GPS systems today, it knew exactly what you were talking about and it would take you straight there, no matter how far it was. And you didn't have to do anything. You just told it. Voice activated. We've got that technology on several different levels right now too. So the only thing that we don't have is you get in a car, you tell it where to go, and it takes you there, but we're close. They're working on that right now. We're very, very close. Now, what was so fascinating about these ancient ships was not just that they could do this, but where they went. For example, the Fairies of Ireland, otherwise known as the Tuatha de Danann, or peoples of the goddess Dana, also known as Nordic aliens who towered over humans. These were Nordic aliens. Now, you think of a Nordic alien as being maybe just like a Scandinavian on Earth today, but that's not. You could not look at one of these beings and mistake them for a human being. First of all, they towered over us. Second of all, their skin was so white. They were called snow white. They were called chalk white. And if you go outside in the winter and you live in a northern climate and you take your arm and you lay it next to snow, newly fallen snow, or if you take a piece of copy paper and you put that up against your arm, that's the difference in color. They also had eyes that were very, very piercing, bigger than ours. Their hair was, sometimes it was a golden color, sometimes it was white, sometimes it was flaming red, but there was no mistaking them. One look and our ancestors knew, oh, this is one of them. This is one of the extraterrestrials. This is one of the angels. This is one of the fairies. They had so many different names for them. This is one of the gods. This is, whatever they were calling them at whatever part of the world. But these beings, when they left Ireland, one of the places they went, and this just blows me away. One of the places they went was India. Now, India is on the opposite side of the planet. And one of the things they went to India for was cows, healthy cows, because there was something wrong with the cows that were in Ireland. There was something, they called it demoniac. There was something wrong with the cow. There was something wrong with the cow's milk and meat. We could not eat or drink of that cow. There was something wrong with it. And so or actually, the Irish, the Fairies of Ireland, went all the way to India to get healthy cows. Why would you go that far? Surely there were healthy cows closer, somewhere in Western Europe, Scandinavia. Even the Americas were closer to Ireland than India, which was on the opposite side of the world. Meanwhile, in India, the gods are telling their people that cows are sacred. We must protect our cows. Why? Why were they protecting their cows? Were they doing that because they were providing cows for the rest of the world who were having some sort of a problem? Is this an ancient reference to mad cow disease or something similar? We don't know. I mean, these are questions that maybe if we were finding, maybe if we found cows, the bones of the cows from that time period, maybe we could answer that question. Maybe that's why there's so much of an interest in cows today. But the thing is, they went all the way to India, and the cows in India were sacred. So the only theory I can come up with is that they were battling mad cow disease or something similar. The cows were considered demoniac. You couldn't eat them, you couldn't drink their milk. So they traveled that distance to get healthy cows. Now, another trip that they took was to South America, to the Buenos Aires region of South America. And they took at least 3 trips there that are on record. Now, they left an itinerary. We left Ireland and, we came to this island, we came to that island. There were shorebirds flying close by, so you knew they were hugging shore. And when you follow their itinerary and they described the birds that they saw on different islands, the birds' eggs, they described sheep that they found on a different island. They described an island that was clouded in a mist. They described so many different islands along the way. Then when they got to their destination, they described what they saw when they got there. They sailed into an estuary where it looked like there was silver floating on the water or under the water. And it was called, today, it's called the River of Silver, Rio de la Plata, because it has mica floating and it looks like silver. They described the very, very colorful fish. They described the weather. It was opposite of what it was in Ireland at the time. They described the people that they encountered there. And when you dissect the legends, there are other legends that go along with it, where there are races of Greek gods living in this same place. And a lot of the Irish legends, they merge with the legends of the Greek gods, who were also Nordic aliens. Now, the Irish legends of the Fairies of Ireland, the Tuatha de Danann, people of the goddess Dana, as though Dana, the goddess Dana, was their ancestress. Well, the Greek legends have a goddess Danae, almost the same spelling, D-A-N-A versus D-A-N-A-E. And she also, there are, Greek gods that came down from the goddess Danae in Greece. Some of the ancient Irish scholars believed that this was one and the same goddess. And it's very, very likely so, because the Irish deities were very good friends with the Greek deities. They actually went and fought battles side by side with them. There was a druid, one of the most famous druids in all of Ireland. He had advanced technology as well. He had a flying arrow, and he traveled thousands of miles on this flying arrow. He went to Greece, he went to Italy, he went to Scandinavia. His legends literally merge three groups of deities: the Celtic deities of the British Isles, the Scandinavian, the Norse gods, and the Greek gods, all merge with his various legends. He knew people from all 3 groups of these, and he traveled extensively. It was believed he wore a Scottish kilt, or something that we interpret as that. So it is believed that he may have been born in Scotland. He was considered Hyperborean. He was actually, now this is where we get something else that's very, very interesting, another piece of technology that they brought with them to Ireland when they came. They brought several treasures with them. One of those treasures was called the stone or throne of destiny. Now, today we call it a stone. We treat it as if it's just a standing stone that somebody worshiped. But the ancient legends said that this was a throne, a stone or a marble throne. And this throne had the ability to choose the next king. And it always chose a king of either the Scottish race or the Scythian race. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. The druid with the flying arrow that brings all of these together, he was descended from the Greek god Heracles. Now, the Greek god Heracles had a son by the name of Scythes, and that this Scythes had a huge kingdom over in Russia, huge, huge kingdom. And from him came this druid that flew all around the world on this flying arrow. This throne, you would think it would choose an Irish king or a British king or even a Greek king. But what it chose very specifically was a king of Scythian extraction, meaning that it was looking for a very specific bloodline, the bloodline of this Scythes, who was the son of Heracles. And that means that this king was also related to the druid Abaris and his flying arrow, who flew all around the world, tens of thousands of miles. He was one of the most renowned of the druids in the British Isles. He was known to so many different people. We have legends of him outside of Ireland. We have legends of him in Scandinavia. We have legends of him in Italy. So we have, everybody knew this druid that was descended from Heracles, just like the Scythians that this throne chose. Now, another piece of technology, they had flying machines. Besides his arrow, they had flying machines. There was a druid known as Mogruith, and he had a flying machine. It had several different names. Our scholars change the descriptions of these, ancient technologies, these ancient objects that they had, such as the throne. Since the throne does not exist today, since we don't know what happened to it, and there are standing stones in Ireland, in the British Isles, that whole legend has been altered so that they can point to a stone that's just sitting there and say, that's the piece of technology that they described. It was just the stone that they worshipped. The same happened with Mogruith's flying machine. It was originally called a wheel of light. Later, it became known as a rowing wheel, and it became convoluted with the steamboats and the ships that sail the rivers today with paddle wheels. That's how we interpret it, that as if it had a paddle wheel. But this was a flying ship. It went into the sky, and it was described as a wheel of light. Now, here's the thing. UFOs today, there are legends of UFOs today that people describe. We call them Ferris wheel UFOs. And they look like a Ferris wheel tipped on its side, spinning. Usually they have a double row of lights. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens. I've got them in one of the books. I don't remember which one. Probably Fairies of Ireland. It has a whole list of these Ferris wheel UFOs that people have described today. And out of the Norse legends of the Norse gods of Scandinavia, there's also a description that sounds just like another Ferris wheel UFO. So all of these legends come together no matter where they are in the world. Now, this one, oh God, this one gets me. there during the Vietnam War, our soldiers saw UFOs hovering, watching, paying attention to everything they were. And this is something they do a lot of time in wars. This is very, very common. And it's been common throughout all hundreds of years, thousands of years, where when there is a major war, it is not uncommon for UFOs to just hover and watch these crazy humans blowing each other up, shooting each other out of the sky, off the ground, killing each other, blood here, blood there. They must think we're just insane. I mean, how could someone as advanced as we are technologically, how we educate our kids, we've got colleges, we teach people physics, we teach people how to fly to the moon, we've got astronauts, and yet we're still fighting bloody wars. So these UFOs, they watch. Now in Vietnam, there was an incident where we humans shot missiles at the UFOs, and one of these missiles got returned, and it hit one of our ships in the ocean, and we knew that it was our missile because it had a serial number on it, and we knew that that missile had been shot at a UFO, and they returned fire. Not with their advanced technology. They could have blown us out of the water. They could have blown us out of the sky. They could have done anything. Their technology is that far ahead of us. And yet what they did is they took our missile and hit our ship with us, as if to say, hey, don't shoot at us. You can't win this. Don't shoot at us. We're not going to shoot at you first. We're not attacking you. We're just hovering over. We're watching you crazy people shoot each other, but don't you shoot at us. Now, what's the most interesting to me is the ancient Irish legends. When the Tuatha de Danann first arrived in Ireland, these Nordic aliens. Now, we don't know who was in the UFO over Vietnam. We don't know if it was the Nordic aliens or the alien greys, reptilians, who, we don't know who it was. It could have been the Nordics. And these same, the ancestors, what would have very likely been their ancestors, when they first arrived in Ireland, they were forced to go to battle with some of the local people. There was a race of giants that was oppressing Ireland, and they went up against this race of giants to obliterate them, to protect humans. And they did this all around the world. If they had not done this, we would be extinct. The giants would have exterminated the human race, the race of Homo sapiens. So these beings came down out of the sky, and they assisted us in battling these giants. That may have been the nature of this first battle, because the giants were in Ireland at that time, and the Tuatha de Danann had to go to battle with them. But the interesting thing was there were also humans involved in the battle, the local populace, that the Irish that were being oppressed by the giants. The Tuatha de Danann got together with the leader, one of the chiefs, and said, let's look at one another's weapons. And at the time, the ancient Irish, they were battling with spears. That was their weapon of the hour. And so the Tuatha de Danann, they studied the weapon that was being used in battles at the time, and then they showed their weapon, which was also a spear. Now, these beings, they had weapons of mass destruction. It's in the series. You can find it's in several of the different books. The Forbidden Islands of the Gods is the one that has the most detail about these weapons of mass destruction, especially the ones that come out of India, the deities of India. But there are deities of India who have weapons that match weapons that were described in ancient Ireland that the giants possessed. One of the giants that the Tuatha de Danann killed, he had a weapon that is identical to a weapon that one of the gods had over in India. this is just fascinating. When so here's another connection to India. It's just mind-boggling. So they compared the weapons so that when they went to battle, these beings who came down out of the sky, they had ships that went across the ocean with their own power motors of some sort, self-navigating GPS systems. I mean, they had flying machines, they had technology that was just incredible. And yet they fought with spears. They did not use their advanced technology against humans. They fought us on our own level with spears, just like we had. Now, when they fought the giants, they did use advanced weaponry. So you've got to take this into consideration when you're trying to figure out who are these beings. What are they doing up there? Are they dangerous to us? You also have to keep in mind that there's more than one race of extraterrestrial, and they may not all be friendly. This one race that we know about, they are friends of mankind. We also know that there are extraterrestrial giants that are enemies of mankind. We get that out of the Norse legends, particularly. The Norse legends tell us about a race of giants that were enemies, and a race of giants, Odin and Thor, they were friends of mankind. And they did something to prevent these enemy giants from traveling to and from Earth until the end of days, at which point whatever they did is going to break, and then those giants are going to show back up, and there's going to be a great war, and the friendly ones are going to be here and the enemy ones are going to be here. We're going to be here. Everybody's going to be doing battle, but the friends of man, they will come and fight on our behalf to protect us yet again, just the way they did in the Bronze Age. So these legends, they're just amazing, just absolutely amazing. Getting away from battles, they had technology. We found a city, one of the cities in Greece that the Greek gods built. The city is thousands of years old, and this city shows that they had hot and cold running water, a sewer system, and flushing toilets. Now, I don't think the toilets had handles like we do today, but it was, I believe it was a wooden seat that went down into the sewer, and they may have used a pitcher of water to flush it, but they had a toilet. They had a flushing toilet. They had water piped in. The Greek gods, several of their cities, several of their legends spoke of hot and cold running water, and the hot water may have come from hot springs, which we have all around the world. It may have come from, they like to build around volcanoes. They had some way of drawing this hot water into their cities. But here's the thing, this we know. You've heard of this. I'm sure you've heard of this. This is old news. What's new news is we have found, there was a Russian engineer. His name was Frederick Siebold. And I think around the same time that we found the Antikythera mechanism, around 1900, he found this loose stone pyramid in, I believe it was Theodosia, in Asia. This is over near the battle zone where Russia is trying to take Crimea, and this is over in that region. He found this loose stone pyramid, like somebody took a bunch of loose round stones, piled them up into a pyramid, and he was trying to figure out, what was this for? A lot of times we find these loose stone pyramids, we found them in the British Isles, and the assumption is it was some sort of, we always treat, we find these monuments and it's like, oh, they built it for worship. They built it for worship. This, or they built it as a marker. We never stop to consider that some of the things we find had a purpose. And these loose stone pyramids, they had a purpose, and he proved it. He studied the pyramid and realized that what it was doing was pulling moisture out of the air, creating condensation inside the stones. And at the bottom of the pyramid, there were pipes coming out, terracotta pipes, and water was coming through those pipes. So he realized that these pyramids were water collectors. They were pulling water right out of the air. So he decided to build one to prove the theory. And he studied what was there, and he built one on a very much smaller scale. He built one, and it worked. It pulled water out of the air, and the water came out through the pipes. I think he created a base that would collect the water and some sort of a pool. And from that, plumbing pipes. So they were actually building these. We can do it today. This is what's insane. This technology was easy. You needed stones, you needed some pipes. It wasn't rocket science. It was something that pretty much anybody anywhere in the world could be taught to do. And you do have to have the right climate. You do have to have moisture in the air. Usually they like to do it up on a hill or a mountain that's closer to the sky where you get more moisture. But why aren't we've got droughts. We've got people that are struggling for water. And I think I did read an article where I think might have been somewhere in Africa. Somebody was trying to teach something similar to this. We should be doing this on a massive scale in regions where you can't have a water source like we would have in a major city right now. This can be done, and we should be doing this. I mean, this is just a brilliant, brilliant thing that they did. It was so simple. Stones. You just have to, do it a particular way, and it can be taught. Now, another piece of technology they had, this is good. This is straight out of Star Trek. We get these legends from the Christian saints. We get these legends from Jesus Christ. We get these legends from the Fairies of Ireland, the Nordic Aliens. We get these legends, from several different sources, not just one. They had some form of food replicator where sometimes it was in the form of a crock or a plate or a tablecloth, something, a normal everyday object, but whatever it was, somehow it always produced the food that you most wanted. Just like you're on a Star Trek ship and you punch it in and you say, I want an ice cream sundae. Whatever the person wanted, it was produced for them. This is something we haven't figured out today. We're not there. I'm sure our scientists are trying. They've got to be trying. They also had cups, goblets that produced whatever beverage you wanted most at that moment. They also had hampers and so forth. They had a way of multiplying food. Now, we get this out of the Bible. Jesus, with these multitudes of crowds, he's just got a few fish and a loaf or two of bread, and he feeds thousands of people. He breaks off a piece of it, and they pass the bread around, and everybody eats, everybody's belly is full. This isn't just in the Bible, and it wasn't just Jesus. His apostles did it too, and they somehow trained other apostles, whether it was technology, how they did it, we don't know. But we've got these biblical stories. We've got these stories out of the, Celtic gods. We've got stories from around the world about some manner of multiplying food so that what looks like just a little bit feeds a whole lot of people. Now, whether this goes hand in hand with the food replicators, we don't know. But this is another piece of technology that we've been told that they had, that of course we would still call magic today. Another one of my favorite, this one probably one near and dear to my heart. In my studying, I've studied these beings extensively, the Nordic aliens of the Bronze Age, particularly the Fairies of Ireland, but also as they spread out into other regions. That's how what I thought was going to be one book, Nordic Aliens and the Fairies of Ireland, somehow became 9 books because it just expanded. Every time I turned around, there was another thread to follow. And these books take you into the Americas, they take you to India, they take you to Europe, they take you to North America, Central America, South America, they take you all over the world. They take you to China. I mean, these legends, it's amazing. All of our ancestors collectively told us about these most amazing beings that came down out of the sky. And we were so backwards. Our concept today of what we were when they arrived, it is hard to even put into words what our ancestors told us we were, who we were, and what we did. I mean, we had nothing. We were not growing corn. We were not building houses. We were just, wandering around taking whatever food we could get in the moment. And that sounds pretty innocent, but we were also cruel to such an extent to one another. Our cruelty and our hatred of people who were not us. And this was not just a racial thing that one color to another color, to one religion to another religion. This was anyone who was not in your village, just 2 or 3 villages away. Everybody was your enemy. And what we did to each other was just heinous. I wouldn't even want to repeat some of the stories that I've read of what humans were when they came down out of the sky and literally lifted us and taught us everything we know. We think we figured it out on our own. You look at the human evolutionary timeline. Humans existed in some form or another, and not, you take us collectively all the way back, and then as we became Homo sapiens and so forth, millions of years. Our evolutionary tree goes back millions of years, where we weren't even in the Stone Age. All of a sudden, these beings come down out of the sky. Our ancestors told us that. Our ancestors told us this. They came down out of the sky. They taught us how to keep cattle. They taught us how to ride horses. They taught us how to grow wheat. They taught us how to build houses. They taught us how to read, how to write, how to build boats. They taught us hunting. They taught us everything. They taught us. You got to stop and think, when you teach someone how to keep cows and sheep and goats and herds, there's something that goes with that. You can't just have some animals and they procreate and they make babies and you have more and more and more. They get sick, they get injured, and you have to have veterinary medicine to deal with that. You have to have veterinarians. So they taught us how to be veterinarians. They taught us how to be doctors, for humans. And this is where it gets really, really interesting in some of our ancient legends. Now we have, we think we've got these bloody rituals that we go back to. One of them has to do with taking the entrails out of a dead animal, reading the guts, breeding those guts to come up with some prophecy, some hocus pocus thing. And this is what we believe that our ancestors did, that they killed animals and took the guts out to try to come up with some witch doctor thing. But what this was, the extraterrestrials were teaching us veterinary medicine. So just like our doctors today, just like our veterinarians today, you had to dissect bodies to learn what was inside those bodies, to learn how to recognize diseases and illnesses. That's, somehow when the gods went back where they came from, when they vanished from Earth, which they did all around the world, we dropped into what is known as a dark age. I don't want to say dark ages because that implies that it was the same all around the world at the same time. They left different regions at different times, so each region had its own dark age or dark ages. And when they left, we devolved into some of our bloody rituals. We forgot what we were taught. They weren't here anymore. So some of what they taught us got twisted around into something completely different. And they may have done some of these bloody rituals after the deities left, and done it for no other reason than not understanding why it was done in the first place. But originally, they were teaching us how to be doctors. They were teaching us how to be veterinarians. But back to where I was going to go originally was, we have we think of another thing. This is amazing. Mermaids. We have this concept that mermaids are this half fish, half human, usually a beautiful woman with this long flowing hair, but her bottom half is a fish, and she goes in and out of the water. And that's what we think of a mermaid today. That is not the ancient description. The description has changed. Somehow we changed it into something that is almost impossible to believe. But the original legends, we get them usually, a lot of these legends come out of the British Isles, but we also have them out of Mesopotamia. We have them out of Scandinavia. And these mermaids and mermen, they looked just like us. They looked very human. And again, they would have been Nordic aliens, but Nordic aliens are, you can't mistake one, but they are humanoid, very, very human looking, but you can't mistake one. That they wore what sounds like a sealskin suit. It was described as being like a seal. When they were wearing these suits, they could lay on a beach that was full of seals and blend right in. So whatever the suit was made of, it was probably sealskin. They were not described as having a fishtail. They were described as having flippers. 2 flippers, just like we have flippers today for scuba diving and snorkeling and just swimming, to make swimming easier. We have flippers. This is how the ancient legends described mermaids and mermen. They had flippers, but most of all, they had headgear. They had some sort of headgear that allowed them to go underwater and swim away, just like our scuba divers today. And one of these mermen actually invited a human to go with him under the water. He let this human put on this helmet, and the human was able to go under the water with the merman, and then he went back to his home, up on dry land. These are the descriptions that we're given. Now the mermaids, the women, oh my God, human men just coveted these women. So they would find out where, sometimes they would come in a group. They would come on to land, usually at night, under a full moon, and they would just have themselves a little party. They would dance and they would laugh, and they would take off their suits. Sometimes a human man, knowing that they were going to come on a particular night, watching for them, would lie in wait. And when one of these mermaids would take off her suit and set it aside, he would steal that suit, so that when her people left again, she couldn't go. She did not have her diving suit to go with the rest of her people, because they didn't come by ship. They came as divers. where they came from. Did they come from an under? No, we have legends of underwater cities. That's for another topic. That may be where they came from. They may have had an underwater ship that they went back and forth to. We don't know that, but we know they came up out of the water. They took off the suit. They took off some sort of headgear, and then they looked just like us. And they would kidnap. They would force these women to go home with them and be their wife. And they had children. So whoever these beings were, they were compatible with us physically, because children were born of these unions. And these children, some of them had like webbing between their fingers and toes. And there are people today born with a little bit of webbing between their fingers and toes. We have stories of extraterrestrials that people have described seeing that have a little bit of webbing. So it all comes together. You know, current UFO sightings, these ancient Bronze Age sightings, but the mermaids and the mermen, they were nothing more than scuba divers, just like we have today. Now we have in recorded history, what we call recorded history, when we started keeping track of our own history, and we have the history books, we have like Alexander the Great and all the, different, kings that went around and invaded other countries and created these great big kingdoms. Alexander the Great, in his time, we were going underwater in these bells where you would take a bell and somehow they would go down under the water. There was glass and they could drop down. They could collect things from the bottom of the sea. They could look out the glass and see what was down there. But they also had what was known as bladders, where we would have some sort of a leather, or I don't know what they made it out of, sealskin. They made it out of something where it would hold air. And that air that may have been what they were using for their scuba tanks. So we know that we had this at least 2,000 years ago, that we had these air bladders that were being used in our recorded history. So the ancient history that was 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, that's what they would have brought down with them from the sky that they were using. Now, another thing that they had that they did, this goes in hand with what extraterrestrials are doing today. We've got alien abductees, contactees, experiencers, whatever you want to call it, people who have had encounters with extraterrestrials. I'm one of them. And all of these people tell you that the extraterrestrials have the ability to make you see whatever they want you to see. You can be looking directly at an alien, whether it's an alien gray or whether it's a Nordic alien, and you might think you're seeing an owl or a monkey or a spider. You might think you're seeing your best friend. They can make you see. Now, we used to call it shapeshifters thousands of years ago. That's what and it's hard to believe, because you think, how can somebody actually change their shape? How could I become a goat? But it may not have been that they actually changed their physical shape. It may be they projected something, that you saw something different than what you were actually looking at, because we're getting that story today. And that's very likely what these ancient shapeshifters were doing, just presenting some sort of an image. How they did it, who knows? That now we have the ability, our own technology today, to create 3D holographic images. And that may be similar to what they were doing. We are experimenting with, who knows how close we are. If you listen to some of the insider stories that get leaked out, we may have already accomplished this. If not, we're probably pretty close. But the cloaking, the power of an invisibility, which they also had. But they had the ability to show you whatever they wanted you to see. And sometimes what that meant was, if you're in war and you've got one man standing there, they can make that one man look like 100 men. So you would perceive an army much greater than what actually existed. They had the ability to throw, they called it a chip that they threw in the water, and they would throw a chip or chips into the water, and all of a sudden the water would be full of ships. What this actually was, whether this was a holographic thing, that's still a mystery. That is a mystery. But this was something that they were said to have done. And we look back on these ancient legends as mythology. We treat it as fairy tales that our ancestors told us. But we're finding, they describe these stone cities. We're finding the stone cities. Some of the, we have found the Antikythera mechanism. We found it in 1900 in a shipwreck. This mechanism, it's some sort of a box full of gears. They had the ability to input a date, turn a crank or something similar. These gears would turn, and they could go to any date, past or future, and know the position of the stars, the solar system, the planets, the sun, the moon, some of the stars. We don't know how many of the stars because the mechanism is damaged, so we've only been able to decipher part of it. But we know that they could predict eclipses, solar and lunar eclipses. Now, this is a piece of technology that we found that they had. You can marry this technology that we found to the ancient legends of what our ancestors told us, because according to our ancestral legends, the Druids in Ireland and several other people, gods in different regions, had the ability to predict eclipses. Now we know how they did it. So we hear these ancient legends of the ships, the transcontinental ships, that they tell it where to go and it goes there, but we're doing that today. Our technology is catching up to them. They had the ability to clone people. This was one of the ancient Irish legends, but we also get this in the Americas. I've written I want to say it's Moon-eyed people, I think, has some of those legends. We also get it from the Greek gods. We hear about these identical clones where there's 50 identical people. It's always 50. Now in Central America, I think it's Moon-eyed people out of Central America, it was hundreds of identical people. Now, they would abduct a person. This is in the Bronze Age. They would keep that person for 1 year. It was usually a woman. They would keep that person for 1 year, and a year later, they would come up with 50 identical clones of this woman, and they would tell this woman's husband, okay, pick out your wife. Pick out your wife from this group of 50. They were doing this thousands of years ago. They were cloning people. Now, we today have cloned sheep and several other animals. There are even stories, I've got it in one of the books, there are newspaper articles that claim that we've even cloned humans. I don't recall which book it's in, but it's in one of them where it tells you the newspaper and the title of the article and so forth. So we may actually be cloning people. If not, we are at the very least cloning animals. So we've caught up to them. So when you think, well, that's crazy, they couldn't have been doing that. These are crazy stories. How crazy is it when they came down out of the sky? They had spaceships that we know, we got those stories. They had, and we're doing it today. We're almost caught up with them. So in a way, in a sense, it would be as if we had the ability to travel the universe, and we took a starship like Star Trek, travel to another planet where everybody was Aboriginal, living in caves and with no technology whatsoever. And we decided to plant ourselves there and teach them everything that we have, everything that we do. It would be just incredible to them. And that's what happened here. That's exactly what happened here. They came here. It's amazing because we don't always agree with their methods. Sometimes there are people that say, okay, well, they came here and they enslaved us and they forced us to build cities and pyramids and this is one of the theories. Ancient astronaut theory is theory, and everybody doesn't agree on interpretations of ancient history. And everybody could be right. I mean, there could be different groups that are doing different things, but there are people that will tell you, well, they came down and they enslaved us. They forced us to do this. But stop and think about this. We send our children to school. They don't want to go to school, but we make them go to school so that they can learn reading, writing, math, how to survive in our world. We teach them. From their perspective, if you take a kid that doesn't want to go to school, we're horrible. I hate you. I hate you. They say to their parents, I hate you. You're awful. That may very well be the way it was with us, because you can't just write on a piece of paper and tell people how to be a veterinarian, how to raise cattle, how to raise corn, how to diagnose crop failure, mold, mildew, insects, all the different things, bad soil, irrigation. You can't just drop out of the sky, hand somebody a piece of paper, teach them how to read it and leave. They have to learn hands-on. They had to teach us hands-on. So we had to do it. And that might be all that those stories were, that they were determined that we learn it. We may not have wanted to learn it. We're real stubborn. Humans are stubborn. We're pig-headed. We don't like change. We do not embrace change. And they decided for whatever reason that we were going to change. They were going to lift us out of. Now you got to stop and think. If they hadn't come here, we think that we would have accomplished all of this without them after millions of years of being just stuck in the Stone Age. If you go to the most primitive tribe that exists on Earth today, what we call uncontacted tribes, we wouldn't even be that advanced. And you have to stop and ask yourself, would you go back in time and stop them from coming here and lifting us into a new age of development so that you wouldn't have all of this that you have? We have music, we have television, we have movies, we have food, all kinds of wonderful, wonderful food. We can go to restaurants, we can order anything we want. We can have a steak, we can have a sundae, we can have Dunkin' Donuts, we have cars, we can travel to the other side of the world. All of this, the clothes we wear, the bed we sleep on, the comfortable, soft bed with the pillows and the blankets, heating and air conditioning, all of this, running water, bathtubs, showers, kitchens with refrigerators. Would you give that up? Would you go back in time and tell them, okay, we don't like your methods. We don't like how you taught us. You enslaved us and just forced us to learn all this stuff. Would you go back and change that moment and plunge us back into a Stone Age way of living? Because that's the choice, and it's an ethical choice. Now, we face this with uncontacted tribes today. Do we leave them alone to just be who they are and live the way they live? This is something around the world. We have gone into other countries and forced people to change, to learn a new language, to learn a new way of life, to learn a new religion and so forth. And these are ethical questions. And however you stand on it, it's the same ethical question that goes back to the moment of their arrival. So you have to look at where you are today. Would you give up your computer? Would you give up your cell phone? Would you give up your television set? Would you give up your internet? Would you give up everything to go back to that life that we would still be living if they hadn't come? And so that's where it's a tough one. I mean, that's a tough one. I don't even know how to answer that. I wouldn't want to go back to that. I like where I am. I wouldn't want to give this up. So, this is the ethical question that everybody has to think about with these beings. Another technology that they had thousands of years ago that our alien abductees are telling you that still exists today is memory erasing. They pluck someone off the planet today, and you might remember seeing a UFO. You might remember seeing an alien. You might remember being someplace with aliens. You might not remember anything. Your memory might be wiped so clean that all you know is that you wake up out of a deep sleep, terrified, scared out of your wits, and you don't know why. Sometimes that's all you've got. Sometimes you wake up and you've had strange dreams, and aliens and UFOs may or may not be in your dream. It may just be a very, very strange dream, very vivid dream. They don't let us, it's very rare that someone gets to remember everything that happened in a UFO encounter, an extraterrestrial encounter. They have some ability to erase, overwrite our memory of that event. They were doing this thousands of years ago. The Tuatha de Danann, the Nordic Aliens, Fairies of Ireland were doing this thousands of years ago. These all come from our ancestral legends from around the world. They told us the same stories all around the world. They told us the same stories, and yet we treat it as make-believe. We treat it as fairy tales not to be believed. Ancient astronaut theory is changing right now. Initially, it started with, we have a pyramid, and then you analyze that pyramid trying to figure out when was it built, who built it, how was it built, what was its purpose. And we love to call everything as being built as a burial ground. And I think we've grown past that, where every single monument that we find, it's not a grave or a grave marker. We may have found a body in it, but that doesn't mean that that's what it was originally built for. Ancient astronaut theory started with the physical evidence and tried to understand the evidence that we were finding. And now one of the original, one of my favorite ancient astronaut theorists was Zecharia Sitchin. And he focused on the mythology of it, analyzing the mythology, which is what I do. I start with the ancestral legends, and then those legends take me to some of the technology. And then in some cases, you can actually see where we have found the evidence, such as the Antikythera mechanism or ancient cities, the loose stone pyramids where the water comes out. So I start with what our ancestors told us and work from there. And I think ancient astronaut theory is starting to migrate to that. I think they've pretty much analyzed the evidence that we have, analyzed it to death till there's not much more to analyze. I mean, they're running out. So they're starting to migrate to the mythology, which is what I've focused on since the beginning. And there are people like me that have focused on it from the other aspect. I have devoted myself to studying particularly the fairies of Ireland and all of the legend. And now we call them the fairies of Ireland, but they were in the Americas. They had colonies in the Americas. So did the Greek gods. Don't recall which book it's in, but one of the books lays out evidence that the entirety of North America at one point was a place of refuge for the Greek gods when they left Greece and all of the places that they were living around the Black Sea. They were up in the Russia, up into Russia and the Ukraine, and they vanished approximately 1100 BC from Greece and thereabouts. And we don't know where they went, but there's evidence that they came to the Americas. And I've got 3 books on the Americas: Moon-Eyed People, Lost Kingdoms of the Americas. These books go into some of these legends where they came here, and the fairies of Ireland are one of them. There is evidence that they came to the Americas. There's evidence in their own legends that they went. There's evidence that they had the Greek gods had colonies in India. We don't think of India as having deities outside of the Hindu religion, but the Greek gods, they traveled. They were everywhere. The Amazons, the warrior women of the Greek god, they were daughters of the Greek gods. So they were Greek goddesses, the Amazons. It wasn't just one colony in one place. They were worldwide. There's a whole book on them, Amazon queens. So these beings were not localized to one little dot on the map. And that's how I expected to write one book on the fairies of Ireland. That one book by itself is 512, 513 pages in paperback. And that's just one of 9 books in the Nordic Alien series. There are 2 other books that go with it. They're not Nordic Aliens, and it's Ancient Aliens and the Age of Giants, Ancient Aliens, and the Lost Islands. So collectively, there are 11 books in this series. I've got one almost done right now. I'm not going to tell you the topic, but it's part of that series. And there's also a book that's my own personal, a very small number of my own personal encounters with extraterrestrials. I can write so many books on that, but I don't believe that it is something I need to be doing. I don't think it would benefit anybody for me to share that. I think this is much more beneficial. I don't even think it's wise. I don't think the powers that be, I don't think somebody wants me to actually be sharing that. So I've decided to close that door and focus on this. And the fairies of Ireland, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be bringing you. And I have immersed myself in their history. I am arguably probably one of the most knowledgeable people on their history in ancient astronaut theory right now. On that note, I will leave you. By the way, this is my second podcast. I hope there are more to come. I do intend to make more. This is something new to me. I have never appeared in public. I have never gotten in front of a group of people to speak about this. I have just immersed myself in the research and the writing, in the books and the studying, writing the books and bringing it to you. And this is my first foray coming out in public and actually talking. So the previous podcast, that was the first. I have never done this before, ever. So bear with me if sometimes I look a little nervous or whatever. Bear with me. But this is something you need to know. You need to know the history of these beings. It's really, really important. In the previous podcast, I told you why. This is mission critical that we understand the history of these beings on Earth. It's not just a cerebral thing. It's not just a point of interest. Our very future, the very future of humanity, could depend on us studying ancient astronaut theory and understanding these beings better, besides just the technology they left behind, who they were. On that note, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a very blessed day.